the culture and politics of this communist fundamental class process. And so I want to return now and do the economics that we started last time. And then we'll be done. And this, again, is a comparable presentation to that which we already did in capitalism. So there are, as someone said before class, there are different non-class processes comprising the culture, the politics, and now we'll see the economics of this different class structure. Let's go back to the economics. It's not possible to have a class process without the economy, even if you have the culture and the politics in place. Even if everybody's persuaded that the appropriation of the surplus by the people who produce it is the greatest thing, since white bread. If everybody's persuaded that that's the case, and if everybody's got rules and laws saying that the producers are the appropriators, even if all that infrastructure, cultural and political infrastructure is in place, there still will be no fundamental class process if people are not producing any wealth. It has to be an economy. It has to be the production of wealth. So the productivity has to be not zero. You've got to be producing wealth so that people can consume it, appropriate it, and distribute it. And if there's different kinds of wealth, that wealth has to be distributed. Because if there's different kinds of wealth, as I did last time, you have to get food to the people who are producing food wealth. Sorry, let me do it again. You have to get cloth to the people who are producing food wealth, and you get food wealth to the people who are producing cloth and whoever. If there's a division of labor in society so that you have agriculture and industry, then the people who are producing food in the agricultural industry have to get cloth, and the people who are producing cloth in the cloth industry have to get food. There has to be an exchange. Society has to figure out a way to have a flow of food and cloth between agriculture and industry to sustain this communist society. No different than a capitalist. It's just sustaining and securing a different class process. So, from last time, suppose this society, and I'm going to give you another example in a few moments, but let's take this example first. Suppose in this society, they decide, that is, the people decide, they want planning. So what I propose to do is show you, again, how planning might work, and we'll do the market. But first, let's do planning. So they decide that, what do they decide? The individuals in this society, this so-called communist society, decide that the individuals in the society will determine the relative prices of food and manufactured goods, food and cloth. They'll also determine the prices of all the inputs. So the planners have to administer the markets. That's what I mean by plan. Administer. And I presume they'll try and set prices such that these markets will equilibrate. That is, the supply of food will equal the demand, and the supply of cloth will equal the demand. So the first question is, how do they do that? That's a big task. So that's not a minor task. It's a task that we do every single day in our households. Businesses do it inside their businesses, and now we're talking about how it's done for the economy. Suppose, it's not the only way, here's one way. Suppose these planners are enamored with Marxism, not terribly surprising, and they use then Marxian value theory to set these prices, to administer these prices. So they ask the question, how much labor does it take to produce food and cloth? So let's go back to what we already did in this course and make use of it. So they say, okay, how much labor does it take to produce the machines to produce food. So let's get the food part of the economy. So I have individuals producing food in agriculture. So the first question we might ask is, how much labor does it take in all the machines and tractors and so forth, etc., to produce food? And that's the labor embodied to take it back in machines. So it takes labor to produce that stuff. Okay. Then how much also labor, how much living labor does it take to produce food? And that would be the total labor required. Suppose it takes 4 hours to produce tractors. Then that's the value of a tractor. Suppose the workers go to work, this is the use value of labor power, they go to work for 4 hours. Then the total value of food would be 8 pounds. So that's the embodied labor and all the inputs, plus the labor set in motion by labor power, and the total would be the cost of producing food, 8 hours. That's the cost. Or, what we did before, this is the C, the value of all the means of production used up to produce food, plus the B plus S in the 4 hours. And the total is the value of food. I'll be careful so my system C, communism plus the V in communism plus the surplus in communism. If the state says 1 hour is equal to $1, then this thing would sell for $8. It would cost $4 to purchase all the means of production. You got to pay, let's say, $2 for labor power. The labor power yields $4. You pay them $2. There's $2 of profits. So this looks exactly like the one I gave you for capitalism. There's no freaking difference. What's the difference? What's the difference? Your exam question that's coming up. What's the difference between capitalism and communism? Yes, sir.
In capitalism, value is determined by the market, and
No.
Yeah.
No, that's not a dispute. That's not the answer to the question.
The workers are appropriating and distributing their own
That's the
surplus.
answer. Is that the difference here? So let's go back. This is what I've taught you. I haven't taught you that other stuff. You get that in other places. What I've taught you is the difference is what you just said. The difference is that in communism, the workers get this. They appropriate the surplus profits. In capitalism, they do not. That's simple. That's one sentence. I just told you, in communism, we can have both. We can have either planning or markets. I just said, I'm going to do planning now, then I'll do markets. So you can't distinguish capitalism and communism from markets, since markets can be present in this. I'm going to do that, and that's in your reading. So the difference is the fundamental class process. And then, to add to what he said, or I cut him off, then if the workers who produce the surplus, they would also be in a position to distribute the surplus that they produced. That's very different than in capitalism. Let's take manufactured goods. So this is food. Let's take cloth. This is industry. This is agriculture. So we have our division of labor. Same equation. This is the labor in machines plus the labor that's alive, living labor, and the total labor to produce cloth. So I'll just take different numbers just to make this, to make it dramatic. So 2 hours of machines plus 2 hours of living labor, 4 hours to produce 1 unit of cloth. This is 1 unit of food, 1 unit of cloth. See, communism plus the communism plus surplus, communism, the value of communism. And this would sell for $4. 4 hours, $4. So the planners and the engineers, they're in the background. You ready now? The planners and engineers, they occupy a subsumed class position. So a portion of this surplus has to be given to the planners, the economists, the engineers, who do what? What I just did on the blackboard. So they would have to come up with the economic structure, the theory of these two equations, or these 1, 2, 3, 4 equations. You have to pay them to do that. You get a cut of the surplus because they're supplying the understanding of what it costs to produce food and manufactured goods. Suppose the plan, there's no necessity for the next step now, of any of these steps. Okay? Suppose the planners, as I told you, they want to get food over there and they want to get cloth over here. That's called trade. So they want food to go this way and they want cloth to go this way so that people can survive. I'm assuming that all the workers need both products. I'm assuming. So they establish a relationship between food and cloth. The relationship is called a market. That's all it is. That's all it ever was. It's just a relationship. It's an economic relationship between two aspects of society. And the relationship they set, let's say, they set 1 unit of food is equal to 2 units of cloth. Now let's examine why on earth they would do that. I mean, I'm repeating what one of you told me last time. Well, let's see. The farmer, the communist farmer, gives her food rather, comes to market and exchanges, or if you want, sells the unit of food for 2 units of cloth. Or sells the unit of food for $8. And takes the $8 and buys 2 units of cloth, which is $8. So the way they set it up, this is called an equivalent exchange, and it's why the planners may set that price. The price of food being 2 units of cloth, the price of 2 units of cloth being a unit of food. $4 here, $8 here. Why? Because it's equivalent. The farmer sells his or her food for precisely what it's worth, which is what? The 8 hours of toil. And gets back exactly what she gave up, 8 hours. Because that's the value of the cloth, 2 units. 4 plus 4 is 8. By the same logic, the cloth maker gives up 2 units of cloth, is giving up how much? 8 hours. 4 plus 4, 8 hours, 2 units. This is per unit, 2 units, 8 hours. It gets back precisely what it's worth. So everybody is as happy as a clam. You know how happy clams are. So now we've accomplished, via planning, the exchange between these 2 different parts of the economy. Now, I understand lots of other stuff has to be present. Transport has to be present. People's understandings have to be present to figure out. I understand all that. So you need an educational system and you need a transport system to make all this possible, and you need machines over here and machines there. I understand. But nonetheless, Just in terms of the economic structure, we have another condition of existence for this communist class structure to exist and be reproduced over time. Questions before I do the next thing? Make sure you understand this, because the next thing is going to be dramatic. Okay, I want to go back to Mr. Novak. Suppose, he claims, suppose that the planners make a mistake. They miscalculate the hours to produce this stuff. They just don't have, they don't have enough information to do the job. It's just too complicated. So they make a mistake. They can't figure it all out. All the different, right now, indirect plus direct labor to produce food, cloth. All the indirect and direct labor to produce food. It's just too freaking complicated, they can't figure it out. Or, they don't have, there's another way of corollary of the first, they just don't have enough information. They may have the talent to figure it out, but they just don't, they can't get all the information from all the inputs. It's so difficult to get this embodied labor. There's so many different inputs, and they have to know all that, they have to add them up. It's impossible, he says. Third, suppose they also deliberately make a mistake. They know what it should be, but they use their power to set a different exchange ratio. So let's take the easiest mathematically to deal with. Suppose, for whatever reason, either a mistake, lack of information, or a deliberate policy, they do this. So let's examine this, okay? And I want to, now, you may not know this, but I'm going to tell you now. This is probably one of the most important examples in economics when you're going to analyze the relationship between agriculture and industry in any country of the world for the last 100 years. So this is no minor potatoes. I'm trying to make it as easy as I can. This is a very, very important example. So suppose they set 1 unit of food equal to 1 cloth. Okay. What's the reaction of farmers to this new price?
Upset.
They are really upset. Why? Because they now sell their food for $4 rather than $8. In very sophisticated language, they're screwed. They put in 8 hours of toil, counting what? The labor in their machines, plus their own labor of 4 hours. They put in 8, and they're getting back 4 hours. They used to be getting back 8, now they're getting back 4. So no matter how you look at it, this is a situation of unequal exchange. That's the economic exercise. The unequal exchange means we no longer have an exchange of equivalence. That is, we have people giving up something, 8 hours, and only getting back 4 hours, selling something that used to be 8 now for $4. They're angry, upset. Let's take the other side. How about the communist individuals who are producing cloth? Well, suppose they say, okay, we were giving up 2 and getting back 1, but now with this new exchange, we can give up the same 2 and we can get back 2 rather than 1. They're euphoric. The cost to the farmers is the benefit to the manufacturers. Why would they be happy? Because they now can sell their stuff for more than what it's worth. They sell cloth for more than what it's worth, double what it was worth, I should say. Why is this? Why might the planners have done this? Can you give me a reason why the planners would have done this? Yes, sir.
To increase industrial production.
To increase?
To incentivize more industrial
I
production.
can't do better than what he just did, so I just repeated it to you. To incentive, what's the word you use?
Incentivize.
Incentivize industrial production. What? Look at the word. This means that the manufacturers can give up the same cloth they did before, get back more food, employ more workers, and grow faster. That's a hell of an incentive. Why would the planners be interested in doing that? Yeah, man.
Because industrialization is the key to competing in the world market.
Bravo. Because industrialization, they think, is the key to modernization, whether it be communism or whatever the case may be. Now let's go back. As a communist society, suppose it was established, can you tie that into Mr. Engels? Got rid of capitalism, you freed up the forces of production. What is a way then to allow those forces of production to grow? Machinery, capital goods, forces of production, technology, new machines, that's forces of production. Capital, what's a way to really let it take off? Suppose this is the forces of production, The way to take off, let it grow, is to squeeze agriculture. Or in the language of economists, turn the terms of trade against agriculture. That's what it's called in the literature. So the planners, they made a mistake. On the other hand, they might have deliberately have done this in order to, I'm going to repeat what you just said, in order to stimulate industrialization, especially if they had red angles. They'll develop the forces of production. And the way to do that is to squeeze agriculture, get more food than they would otherwise, and employ more workers to produce forces of production, machines, and let that economy grow. This is what Stalin did in the Soviet Union. This is, for a period of time, what Mao did in China. This was what was done in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in East Germany. Was it successful? Yes. At what cost? To the Blackwood. Think for a minute. What's the cost? What's the danger?
Reduced agricultural production?
Look at the Blackwood. It's got to be something connected to what I taught you, otherwise I wouldn't have taught it.
Uneven distribution and so forth.
Something else.
Might be the anger that's back.
You got angry, let's do it in order. You got recalcitrant, angry, upset farmers because you have turned the terms of trade against them. And what might these farmers do in these respective countries? Yeah?
Revolt.
Pardon?
Revolt.
Say it loudly, sir.
Revolt.
Say it loudly.
Revolt.
Revolt. So, if this were communism, the way we'd establish it would establish the conditions of existence of a revolution in communism. You ain't going to get that anyplace else in the world. Okay, last part of this. With this unequal exchange, the turning the terms of trade against the farmers, which I'm saying, let's assume this is a mistake, or let's assume it's a deliberate policy rather than a mistake, I should say. Do we still have communism? Just pause and think about it. In other words, we're squeezing the farmers, running the risk of very angry farmers, who may stop production of food because they're really angry. So but do we still have communism from the blackboard, yeah?
No, because the farmers are the creators of the socialists, and they're not.
See, that's not what I taught you. So let me be angry and upset. But I really do like you because you've answered 98% of the questions. So I'm going to fail you. No, I won't. Just on your answer. That's the wrong answer. Why? Everything is at stake in this. And his answer, my question is in his answer. Everything. The course almost pivots on this. That's why it's at the end. So it's still communism. Why? And then how do we analyze this? Because I want to come back to your answer. It's still communism, but the question is why? Where are you? My young friend up there. Why is this still, yes, you. Why is this still communism?
I don't know.
Yes, you do, because I jumped on you in your answer to the first question. You gave me a market answer, and I didn't want that. I told you it was communism. Why?
I have no idea.
Or someone else did actually answer. Yeah?
I believe you're looking for because the producers of the surplus are receiving and distributing the surplus.
Okay. Okay. Let's pick up what you just did. Let's go back again, and I'm going to repeat it. I'll repeat. I've done it many times, but let's see if we can. By the way, you don't have to believe this or accept this, but that's part of the course. There's two different things going on. Communism is defined over here from Mr. Marx, and what Engels should have done, but he didn't. What Lenin should have done, but didn't. What Kautsky should have done, but didn't. As the same individuals who produce, also appropriate, and as you said, distribute the surplus. That's it, folks. That directly comes from Marx himself. That's it. However, in this communism, we have a problem and a tension that you mentioned to me before the class. We have something which stinks, which is that the planners, who may have the best intentions in the world, they want to grow communism by growing industry, forces of production. They might be well-intentioned. They set a price which discriminates against the communist farmers in order to grow communist industry. It's still communism, but they've created a contradiction and a tension and a problem in society which could rip it apart. Because the majority of people may be living here rather than here. So, you ready now? This is a difference between class and power. That's why it's such a difficult point. We all, including me, we all think we evaluate life in terms of who has power over whom. The surplus labor analysis is not a power analysis. This is an example in which, from the definition of surplus, you've got a communist society. Even though the majority of the population are relatively powerless. That's the problem. That's not the problem. I mean, that's an analytical problem in terms of how people understand this stuff, because communism and capitalism is always analyzed in terms of power rather than surplus. Yes, sir?
But in
in
this example, couldn't you say that the surplus that the farmers are producing is actually being allocated by the clock years?
No, all you're doing here is, this is the issue of exchange which takes place after surplus is appropriated. That's all it is. So this is the world of exchange, but the world of, remember, the world of surplus has got to do with who gets the use value of the labor power. So give me a concrete example, and I'll do it again later on. Okay? Let's take it 7 days of the week. On Saturday, the communist farmers and manufacturers get together and they appropriate this. They get a sheet. And they get the sheet, the counting sheet says, okay, you have, let's say, 2 over here, you've got 1 over there, let's say, and you together get the 3. Now you've got to decide what to do with the 3. So you distribute, these various, these cultural providers, these political providers, and these planners. Then the planners establish the price. So there's a difference between the exchange, the flows, and the appropriation. I understand you need both for both to exist, but they're not to be conflated. Now, I'm going to do it later on with markets. That is private markets. So we're going to do the same thing again with private markets. So planning is not communism, whether it be under conditions of democracy or, in this case, a kind of despotism of industry. Planning is, what I showed you. Planning is not the same as communism. You can't deduce communism from planning, nor planning from communism. Distinct analytical parts to the world. That's what I mean by Engels and the rest of these characters. They thought that the surplus thing was either a technical matter, or the surplus organization would necessarily follow from a revolution over the market and property. They made that's the double error. It's not a technical matter at all, and it doesn't necessarily follow from a establishing collective ownership of the means of production or planning. Okay, last step on this. Now we can put it all together. Okay, we have then. I'm going to get rid of this. By the way, because I know how this goes when you're sitting there and taking notes and trying to figure it all out, I'm making no judgment on whether it should be equivalent or non-equivalent exchange. You can come back and give me an argument of the following, which I find perfectly acceptable. You can say, look, I'll give you a reason, reasons, Professor Resnick, why this should be 1-to-1 rather than 2-to-1. I'm going to give you a reason why they should foster industrialization and run the risk of the farmers being upset and angry. And you can provide that argument, and I say, okay, I buy it. Maybe that's a risk that they should take. But I don't have any problem with it. I just want you to understand there's a risk. Last step, okay, to put it together. We have the surplus value that is being produced by these workers and is being appropriated by them. They get it. Then they have to distribute. So I'm going to, in the order that we did it, they have to give a portion to the cultural providers. They got a portion to the politicians, the ones that provide the laws and the rules and the force, managers and so forth, discipline. And they have to give a portion to the planners, economics. By the way, do they have to give a portion to the sun? Do you need the sun in order to have the left-hand side of the equation? Yes. No sun, no life, including this. So you need the sun up in the sky. Because they have to give a cut of the surplus to the sun. This is nature. Is it so? Is it such a ridiculous question that you don't want to venture there? Yeah, man.
It's a subsumed class process, but you don't.
Yeah, I understand. There's a subsumed class process right here. They have to give a cut of the surplus to get sunlight.
So they don't pay for it, but it's still
I'm sorry?
enabled. They don't have to pay for it, but it's still a process that enables.
It is. If it's not paid for, it's what's it called? No, if it's not paid for, it's free. So it's still a condition of existence. So there are many conditions of existence, but they might be free. Okay? You still need sun up in the sky. You need rainfall, you need all this stuff. You need nature. The environment has to be there, but it may provide these natural processes like sunlight for free. Watch. I'm glad I asked this because Marx is not the only one that did this. Historically, many economists did this. Suppose we have here another condition of existence. We have sun, that's free. By the way, can you think of a condition under which the sun would not be free? Science fiction stuff now, yeah?
Pollution, blocking the atmosphere, and blocking.
Well, suppose you would like to write literature, or you're taking a course, you're going to write science fiction. Can you think of a way to turn that which is free, unfree? Yeah?
The aliens own the sun and they're in charge of it.
Sure. In the science fiction, right, one of you will write them. I had a student in class a number of years ago. So he loved it, Soviet determination. He turned it into a movie and nominated for an Academy Award. I can't remember the kid's name. He does movies and stuff.
What was the movie?
Pardon?
What was the movie?
I can't remember. It's terrible. But I got an email from him saying that my movie, blah, blah, blah. So here's something you could write. You got a condition of existence, but you turn that which is free into something you have to pay for. And maybe that's the direction we'll go with sunlight. I don't know. Now, can you apply what I just said to you to some other input that a lot of people thought should be free, but now no longer is free? Yeah.
Water.
Oh. Okay. Water. And do you have another one?
I was going to say water too.
Okay. Right. Water at one time was abundant, especially in the States. Increasingly, that which is abundant may not be, and maybe there'll be a price. There's another one. Yeah?
Air.
Air? Good. How about the biggie? Land. 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 Suppose you are a member of the Iroquois, wherever they were, and you think land is owned by God and it's free. That's what God gives you. It's free. You don't pay anything for it. But another group come in and they say, no, land is private property and it requires a rent because it's owned. So many economists, way before Marx, ran into the following problem. It's actually in the Bible, the Old and New Testaments. The land is given by God. That is given by God. You can't then turn it into private property. But the moment it's turned into private property, like air and all these other important parts of nature, is the moment a cut of the surplus has to be given for that which is now socially contrived to be a scarce resource. So the importance of this is the notion of scarcity is socially contrived. It's not a given. It's socially contrived. There are societies in which the land is free. No rent. Okay, you got this. You got the cultural providers. This is a condition of existence on the left-hand side. You got the political providers, okay, Communist Party officials and so forth. The soldiers' condition of existence. And you've got economics, the planners, and and also people who are going to expand communism, hire more machines, more labor power, and so forth, etc. Suppose it's the case that let's take this one. Suppose these people say, look, we're going to be invaded by a capitalist nation. Things don't look so hot. So we need more. And perhaps, people are persuaded. What will happen to this society? Blackboard. Yeah.
The subsistence class payments to the other parties will go down.
Even before that happens. You're correct. But before that happens, what will happen to this equation?
Come in balance.
Good. So is a crisis possible in communism? You just got to be Blackboard. So communism, unlike what I taught you about the utopians, is no nirvana. They thought communism would be, perfection and harmony. Remember harmony, heaven on earth? It's communism, but man, oh man, it didn't have problems. It didn't have crises. Not just because of what I just told you about agriculture and industry, but here's another one. So, he said, one possible solution to this is to cut this and or cut this. And what'll that beget? Yeah.
Those subsumed class processes may not be maintained, so you may not secure the conditions of existence.
Absolutely. The cultural providers then may not be able to provide what they were providing. The planners may not be able to provide, and you would have a different kind of crisis. You solve this one, and you get a new one. So someone says, on the right-hand side of the equation, my God, the way to deal with this is to do that. And what's the problem here?
Not easy to do.
Let's assume it is easy to do. Let me tell you how to do it. Okay, this is how easy it is to do. We are being invaded by barbarians. They hate communism. They hate the idea that the workers will appropriate their surpluses. It's dangerous to us as capitalists. We're a capitalist nation. That's freaking dangerous if people come to believe that. So we've got to get rid of these communists. Hence, the communists have to raise an army to protect communism. And what they do is they say to everybody on the left-hand side of the equation, you've got to work harder, you've got to make a sacrifice to save communism. Otherwise, you're going to lose it, you're going to be enslaved. That often works. I'm not saying, it's easy, but my God, that's a new theory. It's a theory to protect communism. What might be its consequence? You save communism, what might be a consequence if it works? Yeah, man.
If it works, then they could increase production and meet the demand.
I understand. That's what I just did. What may be its bad news? Anybody other than you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, if that becomes the status quo, then
the new status quo.
Yeah, if that becomes the new status quo, then the equation's going to adjust. So you're going to have a crisis that develops again down the road, which means you have to go back to them again.
What's the crisis down? What's the new crisis?
Well, if you have to increase the allocation of one of these assumed classes.
Yes, I understand. We're taking care of it. We've balanced it out. This goes up by 10. This goes up by 10.
Right. So then that becomes the status quo. Then what if that needs to go?
No, let's assume it doesn't. We're all set. We're all set. Is there a problem?
An increased rate of exploitation?
That's the answer. There's another equation. You can't lose it all. We're at the end of the course. Okay? We're getting close to the end, but you can't lose it. There's another equation which says, I'll put it real big letters. Necessary labor, communism, plus surplus labor, communism, is equal to total labor. And if you're going to surplus value, if you're going to bump this, if you're going to bump this by 10, okay, and if everything else is the same, you're going to reduce this by 10. You're going to reduce the wages of the workers. And therefore, if you do that, those workers might be upset. And how do you deal with workers how do you make the workers who have lower standard of living still support communism? This is what you were after. I want to get back to your point. Let me ask the question again. These people's wages are being cut. Okay? They're doing what they're doing what the state asks them to do. They're supplying more. Their wages are being cut. But how do you make them be willing partners in this endeavor? Okay.
You need some other non-class processes that convince them that this is the right thing to do.
Good. So you need a new culture to come out, which will persuade them that they should cut their wages to make the society work. But suppose that's not sufficient. you tried that, it looks pretty good, but it's not enough. They're still recalcitrant. They're still getting angry because their wages are getting cut. So they're okay, but you know, what else do you need? Much you need? Besides the culture, look at the blackboard. Yeah?
New laws and rules to
You need force too. Secret police. Police. They're persuaded, but if they don't really work hard in the factories doing what they're supposed to be doing to get this extra 10, then you'll discipline them. And that may require more of this. That's what you're after. And hence more of this, and more. No different here than in capitalism. The difference is in terms of who's appropriating, producing, appropriating, and distributing the surplus. I'll come to that in a moment, okay, to show you then the difference. Okay? So to summarize, you have all kinds of tensions and struggles within this communism. The establishment of the collective appropriation of surplus by the collective that produces it is not the end of contradictions. That's what we just did. It's not the end of tensions over the left and right-hand side of these equations. Okay, you had a question, man. I cut you off several times.
I forgot what I was trying to ask you.
Anything else before the last step on this? One more. Yes, sir.
Well, would you say that corporations who give their workers stock options, doesn't that allow workers to appropriate their own surplus?
No. Let's do yours, okay? It's nothing to do with this, but let's just do yours. We've done this one before, but it keeps coming up. So we'll do it again. Okay? So you have a corporation. Workers produce the profit from this perspective. The workers produce the profit, and the board of directors gets it. They get the use value of labor power. They personify politically, economically, and culturally. They personify the corporation under the U.S. Constitution. So the board of directors, a small group of people, become the corporation. You can't have a cup of coffee with a corporation, so you have to personify it in some kind of body. And the body that is personified is the board of directors. And so they get the profit first, legally and culturally. What I mean economically, the accounts at the bank are in their name. Deposited, GE, and the board of directors are the only ones that can get that money in disperse it. No one else. They may decide to give shares of stock to their employees, whether they be managers or workers. Doesn't make any difference. They may decide, okay, if you've been in this corporation for more than X years, 5 years, whatever the case may be, then we're going to allocate you so many, 100 shares of stock. And why that may be advantageous is they allocate to you shares of stock at, say, whatever, $50. And if the price is in the market of 75, then you have an opportunity to buy your shares at 50 and sell at 75, and you get a capital gain. Okay, so you can buy at a lower price than what you can sell. That's what the stock option is. But it doesn't radically change who's getting the surplus. Last part. Why might the board of directors give stock options to its workers? Many of these companies do. Some of you are going to be involved in this when you graduate. Okay, so you get, it's a way for you to be relatively successful in what you do. Maybe, one of the jobs that you would get. So why would a corporation give stock options? Yes?
Productivity, incentivization.
Absolutely. So it's a way of giving an incentive to its workers, and it is very clever. If, under income tax rules, if the tax on a capital gain is lower than the tax on ordinary income, then you, as a receiver of the stock option, might be very interested in getting that option rather than an increase in income. Because you're going to pay a lower tax on it when you sell the stock. And how does that help the corporation besides giving this kind of incentive?
They don't have to pay as high wages.
Precisely, their wages can be lower. That means more surplus.
As long as it's escalating.
This is what business schools teach. So it can raise the rate of exploitation. That's what they don't. Last step on this. Any other stuff before we go on? These are very important questions that you ask. The last part. Okay? So what's the benefit of this communism? Well, for the first time, producers would be in the position to receive the total value of what they add. So the total income of the workers would be the following. People always ask me, how do you increase the income of workers? And I always say to them, okay, this is the income. This is what they're getting, B. But now they're getting the entire surplus. So that the workers get the total value that they get. That's not what they get in capitalism. So in communism, they get this. In capitalism, they get this. So let's put language on this. This gives rise to private consumption. That still occurs in communism. There's your food and your TV sets and all that stuff. This gives rise to a kind of collective spending. Private spending, collective spending. For any society, you need both. It's not one or the other. You need private spending on consumer goods to reproduce the workers, but you also need collective spending on what? On you all, schools in the United States. Health facilities, roads, military, blah, 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 blah. You don't live, societies do not live by, I mean, it's something. Some people say, oh, all we need is this. I mean, we don't have to do with that. Or, we only need this. You need both, whether it be capitalism or communism. The difference in communism from capitalism is that the workers are in the position to do both kinds of spending. So in capitalism, above the line, in capitalism, you've got that. In a different group, the capitalists make decisions on this. In communism, the workers are in the position to distribute and hence make decisions on what they distribute. And they can do this with different kinds of market structures, different kinds of ownership. Those are all important. I'm not denying the importance of them. I'm just focusing on this one, which is unfortunately too often ignored. So let me give you some examples. It's quite possible that in the communist society, workers might distribute not less, but more to health. I mean, it's possible they're in the position to make that. The health conditions for the capitalists are not an issue. If you have sufficient money, it's just not an issue. If you don't have sufficient money, it's an issue. Hence, if you're in the position to get the surplus, you're in the position to make distributions over something which may be important. So the health distributions could be different. The educational differences could be different. Here's something, I don't know anything about health. I know a little bit about education, having been in this business for over 50 years. So it could be that the distributions for education might be radically different here than there. And you all know, if you have a different health and different educational conditions, everything changes in society. let me describe to you once. This is difficult to get across. I once taught at a place, not too far from here. I once taught in a place, about 100 miles away, something like that, in which I was much younger. I arrived there as a young instructor, stayed there for a good number of years. And one day, after I was teaching at this place for a couple of years, I was called in by the chair of my department, and he said to me, Steve, he said, here is a key. Oh, it's quite dramatic. What the hell is this all about? This is a key, beautiful key, antique key. And I said, okay, what's this all about? He says, this key is to a cabinet. And in that cabinet, you will find a very expensive sherry. Well, I like sherry. This sounds great to me. 2 hours, I'll finish off the bottle. He says, what I want you to do is to take your class, which had only 12 people in it. I want you to take that class every Thursday afternoon to this beautiful room, which he described, in which sits the cabinet, in which sits the sherry on the lock and key. You want to open it, and there'll be some beautiful glasses there, and you shall pour a little sherry to each of your students and take one for yourself. And I want you to do that every Thursday for the semester and have a nice time in this beautifully appointed room with these, no women at that time, these young men. They had not integrated yet. So I did that. And everybody had a lovely time. We had more than one drink of sherry. I could describe to you 8,000 other things that this very expensive elite school provided to its students that you don't have. You should have. I would love for you to have. That's a different kind of educational system. Were the students invited in you? No. Don't tell me, okay? I taught there and here, so I know exactly what was going on. But position, family, money allowed them to have something which you don't have. This allows a completely different kind of circumstance. The possibility of it. I'm not saying it doesn't have to happen, but it's a possibility. There's a possibility of different health. There's a possibility of different education. There's a possibility of different kinds of expenditures on military, blah, 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 blah. Why? Only the possibility. Because you have a different group who is distributing the surplus from that which exists in capitalism. So the only question becomes the risk involved in terms of these two different kinds of societies. Any other questions before I go to the next step? I'm done with this. The next step will be to discuss different forms of communism. And I want to come back and I want to do precisely your questions, because they're so important. So I'm going to do communism with private property, communism with private markets. Okay. Anything on this? Okay, here we go. Okay, and I'm going to take a very concrete as I can in this example. Suppose we have 10 individuals. Okay, suppose we have 10 workers. And they're producing 20 tons. Oh, I better write it on the board. So this is a society that has N people. To make this concrete, I'm going to say N as 20. So the laborers are, the number of laborers are, what did I say, 10 or 20? There are 10 people. And the total output of, let's say, food is, say, 20 units of food. So what's the productivity of the workers?
2.
So the workers, 10 workers, times their productivity, that's the total food that's produced. So we have N times 2. Each worker produces 2 units of food, 2 tons of food. And for this communism to exist, this thing has to be positive, because 10 times 0 is 0, so it'll fall apart. So, right, you need an economy first. productivity of labor has to be positive. You need laborers, obviously. You need sun up in the sky, you need the politics, you need the culture, but you also need an economy in which it has a positive productivity. Suppose it takes 15 units, or 15 tons, to reproduce the workers. So the consumption of food is 15. So we've got 20 tons being produced, but suppose the consumption of food is 15. So it takes 15 units to reproduce those workers. So the surplus is 5. They produce 20, they consume 15, so what's left is 5. Then the question becomes, who gets the 5? So your profits are 5. Your consumption is 15, your profits are 5. That's equal to 20, that's the total output of society. So the question becomes, okay, if you got a surplus, 20 minus 15, you got a surplus of 5, who gets it? So let's provide some answers. Suppose one of these workers, he may continue or she may continue to work, but suppose the worker gets the 5 as an individual. Got it? So the rest of these workers, they produce the 20 tons, they consume 15, they produce a surplus, but suppose one of these workers gets this 5, and suppose that worker takes the 5 and distributes it on the basis to everybody else in the society, including a portion to him or herself, on the basis of need, on the basis, need like family structure, on the basis of health, on the basis of equity. This is a benevolent distributor, a nice, altruistic individual. This is a good person. Is this communism? So this is a quiz question. Is this communism? But somebody else besides you, because you've been rolling today. Is this communism? Yes, sir.
No,
Okay, sir. That's correct. Why?
because not all the people who are producing the surplus are appropriating it.
So we have a nice, fair, equitable distribution of the surplus. By some. But that's not equivalent to communism. Communism, as the gentleman said, is when the producers also get the 5. They produced it, but they don't get it. Just one person got it. This could be feudalism, it could be capitalism, it could be slavery, it could be any one of these. But it's not communism. The message. A nice, fair, good, honest society, whatever adjectives you want, is not the same as a communist society. And by the way, go the other way too. A communist society may not be a fair, honest, just society. I think that one for you too. In other words, to secure any one of these it's not necessary to secure the other. In the United States, I told you this before, I can't think of a society more free than that of the States. Personal freedoms are abundant in the United States. But it's not a communist society. Okay, next. Suppose we just change it. Suppose now, it's a revolution, and suppose now these 10 workers who produce the 5 also collectively appropriate and distribute. However that's accomplished. So this then would be the communist fundamental class process, and the communist subsumed class process would be in place. Okay? So let's assume now, rather than what I had, we have all the workers who are producing the surplus also appropriate. Ready now, here are new changes. Suppose, along with this communist class structure, we have a complicated economy. So I'm going to introduce some complicated economic changes. In the first one, I'm going to introduce a division of labor. Suppose we have 5 workers, 5 out of the 10, 50%, produce 10 units of butter, and suppose then 5 other workers produce 10 units of bread, both food. So I still have, 20 units of food. This is not breaking up the bread and butter. So we have butter makers and it's going to be difficult. Butter makers and bread makers in a society. And we have a division of labor. 5 people engaged in the production of bread, 5 in the production of butter. I'll make life easy. They each produce 10 tons, making about 20 tons of food. And I'm still going to have communism. So that means out of the 5 units of surplus, 2.5 tons will be bread and 2.5 tons will be butter. The question is the division of labor consistent with a communist society? Yes. And that violates or contradicts a good deal of literature and anthropology. That's why I chose it. Because the anthropologists will argue, if you take their courses, that a division of labor can't exist with a communist society. And here's a common example. Can this division of labor grow? Can there be increased specialization? Can the productivity of the bread makers and the butter makers grow and still have communism? Yes. What's the meaning of that? Well, that communism is not something which would be only applicable for a so-called primitive tribal society. It could certainly exist in very complicated and advanced industrial societies, in which would have very complicated and advanced divisions of labor and specializations of tasks in agriculture. Yes, sir?
So, are the producers of the bread appropriating the bread and the producers of the butter appropriating the butter? Or do they together decide about appropriating all of the?
I don't know.
Doesn't
You can have, sure, Max, you can have either one or both. Lovely. You could have the following. Suppose you would like it to be, you ready now, across society. So what you want is the appropriation to occur in which you aggregate across bread making and butter making. So you pass new laws in a new culture. And the new laws and culture would say, but you need, and the subsumed classes then have to deliberate to answer your question. They got to produce a new understanding and new sets of rules, which is the bread makers and the butter makers shall get together in a place of appropriation on Fridays and be presented with accounting sheets, which is that 2.5 units occur in each. They shall get together and they shall collectively decide what should be done, not just in 2.5, but in 5. So that gives power to each of them over the other surplus that is being produced. But the new rule, the new law, the new understanding is that collectivity aggregated across this divided economy shall appropriate the entire surplus and make a decision on what to do with it.
So couldn't that create conflict not just between the fundamental classes and subsumed classes, but also, let's say the bread makers are like, okay, well, bread is important, you actually need that, whereas butter is kind of unnecessary, right? So couldn't that create more conflict within the fundamental class processes?
And my answer to you is silly, but it's absolutely. I agree thoroughly. Absolutely. And the butter makers will quickly go to work and make the following kind of argument. Okay? Bread without butter is eating cardboard. And if you are a cardboard eater, you are a bizarre human being. And if I teach that to you every single day of your life, then you will understand that both goods are necessary. What we conceive of are necessary to our diet and our taste, and so it is socially contrived. Look, man, every time in my entire, this is true, every time I stop, and I've stopped many, many, many times because I'm an old person, I stop to eat McDonald's. Every time I do that, because the ads attract me, and you know, there's lots of young people running around, I enjoy children and so forth. So I stop and eat. I get sick. So I walk out of McDonald's, I get back into my car, and I'm sick for the next hour. I don't know. Is a McDonald's important to the United States diet? Absolutely. My kids loved it. My wife loves it. The animals I have love it. I feed them my hamburger. It's socially contrived. It's not McDonald's, it's me. So the same thing goes with bread and butter and everything you can. In other words, go the second step. To say that the fundamental class process is in place is no guarantee that it's going to stay in place. To say that the capitalist class process is present in the United States is no guarantee that it would stay in place. And you never know what might undo it, whether it be butter or something else. And that's the vigilance that one would have to have, whether it be in capitalism or communism, because you never know what could undo it. In other words, the societies are extraordinarily fragile. That's the importance of this question. They're delicate, just like you and me. And you never know what's going to undo us. And such is the case with your very important question. Okay, I cut somebody else off. If they had another point. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you take this a little farther with the divisions, and you get so good at producing that it only takes, say, one person to produce and 9 people to basically sit around and watch it produce. Do those 9 still get to distribute?
Bravo to you, too. Okay? The answer is, the way we set it up, the way I set it up, is that the producers of the surplus are the appropriators and distributors. The way you did it, then, if there's 1 or 2, whatever it is, n individuals who are producers and appropriators and distributors, the rest are not.
Well, take it back and say not that they're not doing anything, but they're doing.
No, I don't care about the anything. No. Let's take your question, since it's very, very important in a different way than what he does. Those individuals do not distribute, they don't appropriate, therefore they don't distribute the surplus. They don't. So what we're talking about is a kind of democracy for the people who produce the surplus. But that does exclude these other individuals. And hence, could the communist fundamental class process unravel? Absolutely. And so you would have to come back and say, oh my goodness, how might you create a situation in which you give, now listen, you give some power to the individuals who are excluded from appropriation. But that's the same question in capitalism. People who own the means of production do not appropriate the surplus. They don't get the profits. How do you give some power to those individuals so you don't alienate them? Give them a dividend. Give them a stock option. Have them elect the board of directors. Same thing. Then they have some influence on how that surplus will be distributed. Same thing with your question. It's very, very important. Give some power to those individuals, but that giving them power is not the same thing as giving them appropriation. So it's the same. The issue comes up again and again. This difference between class and power. I shall see you on next time.